Hello, hello. Great stuff. Can everybody hear me? Put your headphones on if you're going to put your headphones on. Quick thumbs up to tell me the headphones are working. Love it. Double thumbs up over there. That's great. Thank you. Good stuff. Right, okay, let's get going. My name is Paul Davie. I am the managing partner for eConsultancy. So we help big global organizations basically build skills and mindsets around digital marketing and e-commerce. So if that floats your boat, come and grab me afterwards. But really why I'm here today, we've got a very, very exciting session. We're going to be doing the eCommerce Expo edition of the Hay Festival today, so slightly different. I'm really pleased that we've got an industry legend with us, James Roper. James started the IMRG, which is the UK Industry Association for E-commerce, back in the day. So he's been the CEO, he's been the chairman of it, so he's literally been there, done it, and would you believe it, he's written a book about it as well. So he's going to share that with us today. We have only got 25 minutes, but I do want to get some audience participation going. I want us to quiz James on kind of his motivations for writing this book. So James is going to share some extracts as we go, and then I'll be stopping and kind of giving some space to ask any questions. So please do ask James. We haven't got him here for very long. And I'm going to make sure that at the end we've got a few minutes to talk about James's perspective on where e-commerce is going in the future. Okay, so without further ado, James, over to you.
Thanks very much, Paul. Thanks everybody for being here. It feels like it's been 40 years coming to this point in my life. You know, we live in a world that any previous age would consider magical, where smartphones serve as our enchanted lamps. E-commerce is a genie that instantly grants our every wish. And 30 years ago, when we started IMRG, none of that existed. Absolutely none. So I've seen a lot in the 30 years that I've been involved in, mainly running as Chief Executive IMRG. And I realized pretty early on that this was so momentous I was going to have to record it. We were tracking the industry from the beginning. I realized I was going to have to write a book at some point. So here's a few extracts of it. It's just come out in the last few weeks, and it'll be released in the US on the 30th. Okay, first bit from the author's note. Oh, by the way, everybody here is entitled to a copy. You'll be offered a copy if you want it on the way out. If you want me to sign it, I'll be over at the IMRG desk over there. Okay. When Sunday shopping was being legalized in 1993, there were no retail websites, and online shopping was considered by almost all of the few people who had even heard of it to be a fanciful idea that would never catch on. I was already 3 years into running Interactive Media and Retail Group, IMRG, a small research project that we had set up to try to get people to realize that e-commerce was going to be huge and to help them get their heads around it. That year, we encountered the internet hands-on for the first time. It didn't seem to make any sense at all. The very idea was just weird. Yet the shrill, screeching, crackling hiss of a dial-up modem heralded the fast-approaching transformation of consumer choice from not so much to everything. Even then I realized that I was going to have to write this book someday as a testament to the rise of e-retail from its beginnings in 1990, so I began to compile the now vast archive on which it's based. And incidentally, that archive is looking for a home. I describe it as a third of a garage and lots of books and reports and things. So I'm looking for a friendly university or somebody who will help me give the thing a home at the end of the day. Because my son's a police officer in the United States. And if he has to come out, if I cut my clogs and he comes over for the weekend, it's all going to end up in a skip. So if anybody can help me avoid that, that would be fantastic. Okay. Second little bit I'd like to read for you. This is about Gordon Moore, the co-founder and chairman emeritus of Intel Corporation. For more than 50 years, Moore's Law set the pace for digital innovation and development. In 1965, when mainframe computers were just beginning to use integrated circuits, Gordon E. Moore published an article in Electronics magazine in which he predicted a bright future for the computing industry because transistors were shrinking so fast that every year approximately twice as many could fit onto a chip. By tracking the evolution of integrated circuits to date, Moore extrapolated that computing would dramatically increase in power and decrease in relative cost at an exponential rate. This observation became known as Moore's law, the pace of which he adjusted in 1975 to a doubling every 2 years. Moore's law's prediction proved to be remarkably accurate from 1965 to 2013, since when the pace has slowed a little. If automotive technology had progressed at the same rate, cars would go almost 300,000 miles per hour, get over 2 million miles to the gallon, and cost less than half a cent. This is why computing is just, you know, what we've seen in my lifetime has just been absolutely astounding. And you know, the power that you've all got in the smartphone in your pocket is just extraordinary.
And James, just on that, I mean, have you, over the time that you've been involved with e-commerce, have you seen it kind of as a linear kind of truth of Moore's law, or are you seeing that it's starting to slow down now, or the opposite, starting to accelerate with things like AI?
It is slowing down now, but it's also changing. I mean, it's not just raw power that's increasing, which it is still all the time. It's not doubling every 2 years, but it's also the way it's being used, and artificial intelligence, that I'm sure we'll talk about in a bit, it is really the next generation of computing. And it's, again, it's a game changer, as the internet has been. So, okay. Moving on to 2007, so we're 17 years into me running IMRG by this point. Conventional wisdom had it that online shopping would peak at 15% of total retail sales. But as we powered past that landmark in the hypergrowth of the summer of 2007, an escape velocity was passed, and retailers found themselves floating out of the known trading universe into uncharted space. Some 27 million British shoppers spent an estimated £35 billion online in 2007, an average of £1,300 each, generating 860 million parcel deliveries. Everything was changing for shoppers as the internet worked its transformation of the possible. Shoppers no longer needed to plan their lives around when shops were open, and for many, queuing for the till was a thing of the past. Online shopping was becoming normalized and indispensable component of everyday life. The range of goods available was expanding to the point where shoppers expected all products and brands to be obtainable. Yet despite all this, nearly half of the top 100 UK retailers still did not have a transactional website at the beginning of 2007, and their non-store sales were just 4.4% of their total sales. Just shows how the people leading the industry are always the last to move with fast change.
So kind of just on that, James has sort of been portraying a picture of what how the e-commerce landscape has evolved over the last sort of 20 years. Any questions or comments for James's kind of story of the early days of e-commerce in the UK? I think he's done a perfect job of describing it.
They're all shy, Paul. We'll get them going.
We'll get them going.
We'll get them going. Anyway, here's some of the most interesting stuff. Data. Yes. IMRG's been doing really the bedrock measurement of e-commerce from the start, and here's a little note about that. Lack of reliable hard market trading data was becoming a problem for the e-retail industry in 2000. Retailers and facilitators wishing to engage seriously in the digital marketplace would need to commit large-scale funding, but after the dot-com crash and most of the dot-lot gone, speculative investment capital for e-commerce all but dried up in Europe. The issue was complicated by the absence of a specific definition of what retail even was. The term retail traditionally referred to the sale of most physical goods. However, reporting was inconsistent, and with an assortment of stakeholders reporting different things in dissimilar ways. The Office for National Statistics used definitions for retail that had been framed in 1948. Consequently, those excluded digital, i.e. virtual, goods and services, software, downloads, travel and event tickets, amongst many other core e-retail categories, rendering them largely useless for quantifying online shopping. The British Retail Consortium tracked and reported on what its members sold, largely groceries. European Commission data collection methods produced statistics that were years out of date and based on narrow retail classifications. The justification for this was to ensure consistency over time. Before the internet shopping arrived, the primary retail performance indicator was simply pounds per square foot. But now e-retailers urgently needed to be able to weigh and balance and contextualize the many interdependent digital opportunities, threats, trends, drivers, factors, issues, barriers, incomes and costs. A fresh approach was conspicuously needed. And it was that year, 2000, that we first created the IMRG index, which is today still the bedrock of what IMRG is all about, providing usable intelligence almost immediately to marketplace.
So James, just on data, because the kind of picture you're describing obviously feels like quite a long time ago now, and we're awash with data. How would you say that, in today's environment, how would you mark the homework of the e-commerce industry in terms of the availability and, more importantly, the usability of data?
The amount of data, well, we created what became the world standards, and of course it developed over time. But now, talk to our guys on the stand at IMRG, pretty well absolutely everything you could want to know is available. And that was always missing from traditional retail. Retailers had no idea what they were selling, no idea what was in stock. Before the age of computerization, it was all this vague, blank kind of guesswork. And poor old customer had on offer what the local retailers decide to sell to them. So, the world has absolutely changed, and data's been at the heart of the whole thing, of course. I've got to talk about mobile, haven't I? Mobile came from nowhere and now is well over half of online retail traditionally. So just a little background comment. What I've tried to do in this book is soup and nuts, everything anybody could want to know about e-commerce. So it might be too detailed and boring for some people, but if you want the detail, it's in here. But also there's an interesting story of humanity and the crazy stuff that was going on all the time. I remember we had our main conference in 2007, and one of the directors of Royal Mail was there, and he was telling us that their vehicles had done 6 million miles that year delivering parcels for online shopping, the equivalent to a round trip to Mars. And a voice from the audience, of course, quipped, and they were out. So this is our crazy world. Anyway, mobile. Mobile phones had been invented in the 1940s, though they only arrived as a mass-produced consumer product in 1993, when Motorola launched its Dynatac 8000X, effectively a car phone, as it was far too bulky to fit into a jacket pocket. Rapid progress made mobiles better, smaller and cheaper followed, led by Motorola, Nokia, IBM, Siemens, BlackBerry and Sharp, amongst others. In 1992, the year that the number of BT-operated phone boxes across the UK peaked at 92,000. 92,000 phone boxes, can you believe it? IBM created the first smartphone, the Simon Personal Communicator. That's 1992. Of course, mobile was a pretty horrible experience with those tiny little buttons and very frustrating for everybody until 2007, when the iPhone came along and just blew everything apart, and now we all use smartphones, of course. 2010, the iPad, of course. Here's a point that I found extremely poignant. It's about disabled people and how e-commerce helped disabled people, and still does, of course, massively. Online shopping had become a fantastic boon for disabled people. Tesco had been notably active in ensuring that its website was accessible to disabled people with sight, audio and motor impairment restrictions. Nick Lansley, Tesco's head of R&D, had championed this activity and worked closely with IMRG, the Royal National Institute for the Blind and others on developing and applying best practice, such as appropriate design, navigation, text and colors, compliance with text readers, arranging for every image to have text description, and having appropriate alt tags. All of this was new and having a profoundly positive effect on the many handicapped people's lives. I recall taking a phone call one day from a man who clearly had great difficulty in speaking, who thanked me profusely and personally for helping him to do his Christmas shopping. I didn't understand what he meant at first. He went on to explain that for the first time ever, he had, unaided, been able to buy Christmas presents online. It was very humbling. Okay, I'm coming to the last bit that I want to read to you, and then I'd like to have a general chat with Paul about where all of this is going, at least in my humble opinion. And this is a bit from the epilogue, so right at the very end of the book. We knew that e-commerce would blow the doors off the traditional retail model with inevitable consequences for shops and town centres. But none of us imagined that so many of the incumbent political and business leaders would just stand idly by, unwilling or unable to respond, as a tsunami of unprecedented developments approached and then began to overwhelm their worlds. Carelessly ungoverned, high streets, once stalwart enterprises, and entire workforces, as well as the police and enforcement agencies, were abandoned to their fate, sacrificed to the gods of progress. We have come a long way since the days of secretaries tip-hexing on their newfangled computer screens, yet equitable distribution of the benefits that e-commerce and digital empowerment is making possible is still not happening. Why is this? Does it matter? Can anything be done about it? The primary reason for inertia is, of course, that those in power are, unsurprisingly, happy with the status quo. A secondary explanation is short-termism. But the ever-increasing extreme concentration of power, together with the snowballing pace of change, oblige us to look beyond the short term and expand our notions of time or risk calamity. So that's a taste of what it's about. There's an awful lot of stuff. It's taken me 5 years to write this thing, so my advice is never write a book. It's much too much like hard work.
Fantastic. Thank you, James. We are going to talk about the future and kind of where do we go from here. But before we do that, are there any questions or comments for James kind of on his take of how things have evolved over time? No, I think that, yes?
Yeah, lady here.
And if you could say kind of what your name is and where you're from before you share your question.
Sure. Hello. I'm Rebecca Sensix and I'm from eConsultancy. So you just mentioned that it took you 5 years to write this book, so I guess immediately I wondered, how did you manage to keep it current the whole time? Were you constantly revising, and how did you even consider it done at any point, considering how the space moves?
Well, I decided quite a few years ago that I was going to write the story from 1990 to 2020, those 30 years. And I mean, it was quite extraordinary that in the last year that I decided to write about, what happened? COVID. So, you know, e-commerce was kind of plateauing out at that point, and then COVID came along, climbed 50% in a year. I jokingly tell people that I invented COVID to give me a cracking last chapter for the book, but of course that's not true. But I decided that was it. That was the story. Beyond that, I wasn't going to keep up with it. I wasn't going to keep abreast of developments. So this is really what it says on the tin, from dot to dominance. You know, from the very start, we started IMRG unbeknownst to us at exactly the same time as Tim Berners-Lee was writing the code for the World Wide Web. So it really was year dot when we started. And 2020, how could you beat the COVID effect on e-commerce? So I'm glad I stopped there.
Fantastic, great question, Bex. Any more questions for James? Yep, at the back, sir. Could we get him a microphone?
Hi, I'm Wale from Uber Direct. You mentioned that industry leaders in retail are often the slowest to respond to change and to trends. Yes. In your opinion, why do you think that is, and what exactly do they respond to before they start picking up and adopting these new trends?
Well, for the first few years, people just didn't know what the hell we were talking about. It was this you know, distance shopping. It's a fantasy thing that's never going to catch on. People like feeling the goods. They like touching the fruit. And, you know, I got all of this for years. And I was challenged to prove to people that e-commerce was going to be important. We gave up on that fairly early on and decided if people didn't get it, that was their problem. But then it was, you know, for industry leaders in particular, it was, this thing is too complicated. We're just going to leave it to the next generation of people. I think the worst part of it is the short-termism. You know, people are thinking in terms of, you know, 6 months, year maximum. I mean, if you look at Amazon, you know, the classic, how long did it take before they made a profit? I'm not going to answer it. The answer's in the book, of course. But, you know, it was a serious long-term commitment to making this thing happen. And the whole medium is of such a scale that unless you take that approach, you won't be successful with it. And particularly as retail now is so tough, it's harder and harder for people in senior positions to be able to just have the luxury to take that on.
Fantastic, great question. James, we've only got 5 minutes left, so I think it'd be a good opportunity for you to share your thoughts around where do we go for the next 20 years?
Yeah, I firmly believe that the biggest opportunities for e-commerce are yet to come. And I think the stem of this, and bear in mind, I've had the luxury of taking a longer view than most people are able to for the reasons we've just been discussing. And let me preamble this. There was a chap called Charles Jewell, as in Pistols at Dawn, Charles Jewell. Now, in 1889, he was the commissioner of the US Patent Office, and he predicted that the patent office would shrink and close because everything that could be invented had been invented. 1889. Now, he's gone down in history as an idiot, of course, but the point is that a lot of people struggle to see the future, and even if they do, they don't know what to do about it. It's extremely difficult. But I think that the core opportunity, and e-commerce is going to lead this, is the fact that our global value system is broken, seriously broken. You know, we have, our world is driven by financial profit and gross domestic product, which is foolish and self-destruction. It's almost like a religion. You know, you can't extract more and more from the world and it absorb it, as we're seeing all around us. We're just, you know, it's a bankrupt system that basically is everything that we're measuring commerce and the success of our countries on, GDP. It's absolutely insane. But politicians don't seem either smart enough or brave enough to do anything serious about it yet. I was lucky to spend this summer in British Columbia, in Canada, Vancouver Island, and the local indigenous people, they've lived there successfully and thrived there for 10,000 years and more. And they didn't own and plunder the world that they lived in. They were part of it and they respected it. And you know, the values to them were the giant trees and the mountains and the water and, you know, the eagles and, you know, and they didn't own it. They were part of this. And salmon, you know, they kind of worshipped the salmon. Now, they took salmon to feed their families, but they didn't take all the salmon. And, you know, they have a phrase, you know, nature feeds our need, but not our greed. And I think this is the basis of the huge change that we're going to see. The future is going to be nothing like the past. And e-commerce and the voice of people is going to be what changes it. And enlightened capitalism, capitalism is the right way to go, but it needs to be enlightened and it needs to be balanced. And there are many more capitals and values that are not being measured. It's not just about finance. You know, there's social capital, cultural, experiential, health, happiness, the environment. There are many, many sources of value. But in our modern world, we're just not even contemplating any of those. It's all bottom line, short-term thinking. And it's destroying the planet and bankrupting our children, as we read about every day. This isn't new. So artificial intelligence is coming along. And of course, this has been predicted for 50 years by Arthur C. Clarke and many others. You know, it's no big surprise that computers. Can you remember when computers beat chess players at chess, and now they're much smarter than us? This can't be a surprise. We've seen it coming for a long time. But you know, we need all the help that we can get. And I have very mixed views of artificial intelligence, and you hear about it all the time. And it's kind of the latest shiny object syndrome that people talk about. But artificial intelligence, to me, doesn't mean that at all. In 1665, Robert Hooke, the English polymath, was talking about artificial intelligence as microscopes and telescopes. And artificial intelligence is everything that helps us see further and understand more. And you know, the pendulum clock, steam engine, language, mathematics, these are all artificial intelligence. And now the power of computing is coming to be available. Knowing what humans like, there are a lot of bad people out there who try and do terrible things with it. But nevertheless, it's a power that's becoming available to humanity and gives us, hopefully, the opportunity to model where we are and solutions for going forward and getting further. And I think these will be the big opportunities for e-commerce to help people invest in themselves, in their own communities, and move forward. And I've got quite a bit of this in my book as well, because I've been trying to help government. They've had these endless projects to try and help high streets and communities and things that have just been pathetically ineffective. But that is what we need to do. We need to recenter the attention economy back into communities and where people live and social enterprises.
Fabulous. Thank you so much, James. That was 30 years in 25 minutes, so that we covered a lot of ground. The book's out now. As you go, remember to pick one of these books up. It's a fantastic book. If you'd like a signed copy, James will be signing it over in the IMRG stand just there. But can I just ask everyone to put their hands together? Big thank you to James.
Thank you.
And have a great rest of your day.
Thanks a lot.